Margaret Henley stepped off the stagecoach at dawn, clutching her carpetbag and the worn letter from Thomas Brennan promising marriage and a new life. The small mining town of Cedar Falls stretched along the creek, most buildings still shuttered in the early morning light. She walked toward the white church where her wedding was to take place, her heart racing with nervous anticipation. But as she approached, her steps slowed. The heavy doors hung askew, dark stains marking the white paint. Bullet holes scattered across the wood like deadly flowers. "Ma'am." Sheriff Caldwell approached, his weathered face grim. "You'd be Miss Margaret Henley?" "Yes. I'm here to marry Thomas Brennan." The sheriff removed his hat. "I'm sorry, miss. Tom's dead. The Garrett gang hit town 3 nights back. Tom was in the church setting up for your wedding when they came for the church silver. He tried to stop them." Margaret gripped the church rail, staring at the bullet-riddled doors. Inside, overturned pews and scattered hymnals told the story of violence. Wilted wildflowers lay trampled on the altar steps. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. "There's an eastbound stage Tuesday. But till then." He shifted uncomfortably. "Folks are scared, miss. The gang's still out there." Margaret looked around the empty street. No one emerged to offer help. She was alone, truly alone, in a town that had already buried her future. "Tom's cabin," she said suddenly. "Where is it?" Sheriff Caldwell pointed toward the hills. "Mile up the creek trail." "But, miss, it's not fit for a lady." Margaret straightened her shoulders. She'd traveled 1,000 miles to marry a stranger. She wouldn't be defeated by fear. "I need to see where Thomas Brennan lived." The cabin sat in a pine clearing by the creek, larger than expected, well built with a stone chimney. Inside, Margaret found an interrupted life, a coffee cup on the table, clothes on pegs, books by the fireplace. On the mantel, a photograph showed Thomas with a young woman and small child. He'd been married before. The letters never mentioned a wife, a child. Then she heard it, soft whimpering from the back room. In the corner, wrapped in a quilt, was a little boy with fever-bright eyes and tangled brown hair. "Papa?" he whispered. Margaret knelt beside him. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Danny." "I'm Danny Brennan." "Where's Papa?" The child burned with fever, his lips cracked. Margaret found water, helping him drink. His small hand gripped hers desperately. "I've been waiting. Papa said wait here till he comes back. But I got sick. 3 days." The boy had been alone for 3 days, waiting for a father who would never return. "Mama?" Danny's voice was small, hopeful. Margaret's throat tightened. "I'm Margaret. I'm going to take care of you." She spent the day nursing him, and as his fever broke, he told her about his life with Papa. How they'd come west after Mama died, how Papa promised a new Mama was coming who would love them both. "Papa showed me your picture," Danny said, pointing to the mantel. Behind the family photograph, Margaret found her own tintype, the one she'd sent with her first letter. Thomas had kept it there, already making her part of their family. As night fell, Danny asleep in her lap, Margaret faced her choice. Take Tuesday's stage back to nothing, or stay and build something from the ashes of Thomas Brennan's dreams. Margaret woke to horses approaching. Sheriff Caldwell rode up with Reverend Phillips and Mayor Hutchins. "Miss Henley," the mayor said, "we need to discuss your situation. The child cannot remain with an unmarried woman." "This child was abandoned and sick," Margaret replied. "Someone had to care for him." "There's a territorial orphanage in Denver," Reverend Phillips said. "It's for the best." Margaret looked at Danny, who was listening with wide, frightened eyes. "No." "You're not his family," the Reverend said sharply. "You have no legal standing, no means of support." "I have $27 and 2 good hands. I can work." "The boy has a claim," Mayor Hutchins said suddenly. Tom Brennan's mining claim. Someone needs to hold it in trust. Margaret saw the calculation in his eyes. You want to steal a dead man's claim and throw his son into an orphanage. The three men exchanged glances. Finally, Sheriff Caldwell spoke. Even if we could arrange guardianship, how would you live? There's territorial law, the mayor said slowly. Homesteading claims by unmarried women. 5 years to prove up the land. Margaret opened the door. Danny stood just inside, having heard everything. If I stayed and took care of you, would you want that? She asked gently. He nodded solemnly. Papa said you were coming to be my mama. Margaret knelt and took his small face in her hands. I already love you. No one is going to take you away from me. She faced the three men. I'll file for guardianship and a homestead claim. Today. 2 weeks later, Margaret stood before Territorial Judge Harrison in the makeshift courtroom, Danny beside her in clean clothes she'd washed and pressed. Miss Henley, the judge said, you're requesting guardianship and filing a homestead claim. How do you propose to support yourself and the child? I've begun taking in washing and mending, Your Honor. I can provide nursing care and teach. I was a schoolteacher in Kansas. Judge Harrison addressed Danny directly. What do you want, son? I want to stay with Margaret. She took care of me when I was sick. I don't want to go to the orphanage. Your petition is granted, the judge said finally, contingent upon successful completion of homestead requirements. Margaret felt her knees go weak with relief. Danny ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Suddenly, commotion erupted outside. The saloon doors burst open as Jack Garrett and his men entered, guns drawn. Heard there was talk about Tom Brennan's claim, Garrett said, his voice carrying menace. Valuable piece of ground. He pulled out a folded paper. Got a deed of sale here. Signed by Brennan before he died. Judge Harrison examined it. This is a forgery, Mr. Garrett. The signature doesn't match court records. You calling me a forger, Judge? Margaret instinctively moved in front of Danny as tension filled the room. I'm calling you what you are, Judge Harrison said quietly. A murderer and a thief. Sheriff, arrest this man. The gunfight was brief but decisive. When the smoke cleared, Jack Garrett and 2 of his men lay dead. The remaining gang members scattered as townspeople emerged with rifles. 1 month later, Margaret stood in her garden, watching Danny play with a wooden horse the town carpenter had made him. The vegetables she'd planted showed green shoots, and the chicken coop was full of birds bought with her first month's earnings. The church had been repaired, its doors painted white again. This Sunday, she and Danny would attend services together, as a family. Margaret, Danny called out, holding up a small carrot from the garden. Look. Beautiful, she said, kneeling to examine it. Your papa would be so proud. Do you think he knows? About us being a family. Margaret looked toward the cemetery where Thomas Brennan was buried. I think he knows. I think he's happy. She'd come west to marry a stranger and found something unexpected, a child who needed her, a place that challenged her, a purpose that fulfilled her. The wedding she'd planned never happened, but she'd found love anyway, in the fierce protectiveness she felt for Danny and the deep satisfaction of making a life from nothing. The church bells rang out across the valley. Margaret took Danny's hand, and together they walked toward the sound, toward the community they were helping to build, toward the future they were creating one day at a time.